Alrighty, folks, what's going on? This is Matt here for Dark One Linux Tech and Gamers, the fusion of Linux technology and gaming, and we are doing something I can't stand doing, but I've gotten so much flack for a certain video that I did ragging on somebody's tier list because they're oblivious to what distros offer. So what this is, I'm gonna let people have their time in the sun. Here is my tier list for a specific demographic. This is the difference. I'm not making broad generalized statements across this. So you'll notice there is one that says no opinions or user or use case specific distros. So I'm not judging these based on whether or not they're good or bad. All distros have value in certain ways, in different ways. They all contribute to the ecosystem in different ways. So despite my own reservations on certain distros, I'll put those to the side and I will still make those recommendations. So understand that the entirety of this is out of the box experience for people who don't give two flying fucks about technology or know what the fucking operating system is. That is the understanding of what I am looking at when I look at some of these distros. Keep that in mind. So MX is the first one that comes up. And MX, I generically have no problem. It's Debian based. It has a few problems here and there, but most distros honestly do. But it knows what it's catering to. It has a fairly good understanding of its demographic of like new users, older hardware, like that kind of stuff. Like it is very forward with its out of the box experience. Doesn't hide a lot of things, which is nice. So I'm gonna put it in good for new users. It's not amazing for new users, but there are far worse choices you could make for new user distros. Now Linux Mint, this is going to be an interesting one. I am not a Linux Mint fan at all, from a variety of different reasons, from their whining and bitching about the shit that Canonical does while still relying on most of Canonical stuff from Ubuntu, to just their overall approach of like impeding user choice and options with like, if I want to install snaps, I don't care that you don't ship by default. That's fine. But if you're going to impede me from uninstalling the shit, that's kind of annoying as a new user, or as any user, honestly. So for me, despite all that, that's my personal gripes. Overall, I'm going to say it's amazing for new users, especially for those coming from Windows. Now, again, take all my personal gripes out of it. For me, what I can appreciate is the work and the audience that they cater to, that it works for. They do look to constantly improve. I'm not the target demo for Linux Mint. So to each their own as it relates to that. But as far as distros for new users coming from the other operating systems, it is a good place to start. There's a lot of hand holding and a lot of other stuff that they do to kind of mitigate a lot of the esoteric stuff that happens in Linux. So I'm not going to complain about I'm not going to say it's bad for a new user at all. Despite my personal gripes, I think it is a fantastic way to introduce people to Linux. So Endeavour is going to be the next one. And Endeavour, see, this is where we get into kind of hard to really gauge, because to me, Endeavour is a GUI version of build on Arch. So to me, it's very use case specific kind of distro. But it does occasionally get lumped in with new users. But I'm, again, going for the out-of-the-box new user people. So, again, I wanted to drive that point home. Keep that in mind. So, for me, I'm not gonna generically, because I ask questions when a user wants to look at Linux. So like, what are you looking to do, etc. So hence why distros like this are going to fall into this more often. Endeavour is, to me, that build on Arch kind of firm a GUI approach, more appliance for Arch with a GUI. That's my take. Not everybody's. That's fine. So next up, we have Debian. Now, despite my personal issues with Debian as a base distro, like using straight Debian, it's not horrible for new users because there are worse options. Navigating the website is not fantastic, and things like binary blobs and getting the most out of your hardware because of the philosophical back and forth that Debian does with like user choice but not limiting it, but having their principle, etc., etc. But the actual shipping distro is not terrible. It is not bad in the slightest for new users. If your stuff works. If it doesn't work, then there's the problem. So it's okay, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And kind of for the okay category to me is kind of like, how many hoops do you have to jump through to actually make it a usable distro? Debian, there's hoops, but there's not a ton of them. But there's a learning curve to the hoops regardless. So take that for what you will. Manjaro. I know this is going to make some Linux fans annoyed. Yeah, Manjaro is either a punching bag for jokes, kind of like Ubuntu was a few years ago, or it's, ha ha ha. By the way, I run Arch, and you can, fight amongst yourselves about whether or not Manjaro is Arch. Manjaro is bad, not because of what the company does. And then there's two different, there's the project and the company. As far as the overall thing that it ships, I like the improvements, and I like what they try to do on the paint job for KDE and Arch and all that stuff. And the certain apps and stuff that they bring to the forefront to make like overall Linux more usable. However, a lot of the back-end decisions that get made, very beta software, pushing the AUR too much, pushing a lot of the stuff that can make a really bad user experience really quickly is where I have a problem. And that's really what matters to me. They get the out of the box, that initial maybe 20-minute kind of thing. They nail it perfectly most of the time from what I've used it. But anytime you update or anything else, good luck. And once you start adding AUR stuff, well, even better luck, because Manjaro holds stuff back. It can be a day to 2 weeks longer. So it's very, as a new user, recommended distro. I just don't like recommending it based on that too much iffy nature, especially if I'm the one doing fucking tech support. It's just not a fun one to manage, but it also makes for a very pothole filled user experience for a new user, despite that initial 20 minutes that they can get right. So Ubuntu, despite all my issues with Canonical, which there are many, thank you for killing the best desktop Linux I've ever had, which is Unity. The way they're handling snaps, the way they insert the typical 9,000 things you've probably heard from the Linux community about bitching one about Canonical and Ubuntu are terrible, blah, blah, blah. If you look at half the list of this damn tier list, 90% of these are either Debian or they're based on Ubuntu. Yet you will still bitch and whine about them. Need I say more? So Ubuntu is but realistically, name recognition is going to have the most support. And when you take all these other distros again and put them together, Ubuntu still has the biggest install base, despite whatever esoteric changes between projects. The base it's on is still the biggest one. So just from that alone, that makes for a better user experience on so many levels. And I'm not a GNOME guy. Like, I wouldn't generically not myself run Ubuntu, but there are, again, far, far worse distros. So next up, we have Pop! OS. And this one falls right into amazing for new users, simply based on what they've brought to the table. And the video drivers baked into the ISO. Improve the overall experience of Linux tenfold. No more mode sets and all the other garbage we used to have to do just to get NVIDIA crap to work. The graphics card switching, what they're doing with Cosmic and attempting to do with Cosmic. The fact that you buy the hardware from System 76, they will support the distro, they supported it on their hardware. So, like, from a just like buying an experience, you're buying support for the distro that they build specifically for their machines. Now, some people will say, oh, well, the System 76 and the Linux OEMs don't add anything to the ecosystem. Hate to break it to you. If you think that, you're a fucking idiot, because you're not looking big picture. So Pop! OS adds a lot to the ecosystem. They have a fantastic user experience, despite me not being a GNOME guy or that GTK style guy. Personally, I would recommend Pop! OS all the time. Next up, we have Fedora. Fedora is, again, there's hoops to jump through for proprietary codecs and drivers and kind of the other stuff. Not terrible, not great as far as that. Again, I'm not ragging on the project. I understand there's principles with it and reasons and legal reasons. I'm just saying the out-of-the-box experience and the like end user, I don't give a shit about technology experience. There's some hoops to jump through, but it's okay if people are willing to jump through those hoops. OpenSUSE, I can't say I don't have an opinion, but it's, to me, it knows its audience, and that's who it's catered to. And I think that's fine, because like Fedora tries to be more of like a end-all, catch-all kind of distro, kind of like Ubuntu. You know, that very general consumer OS. And that's fine. But to me, OpenSUSE, it knows what it's looking for, it knows its audience, and that's who it caters to. They have tools and all the other stuff, but to me, that is who and what they look for. They're not looking for the out of the box, you know, they don't give a shit about the person who doesn't give a shit about technology. They give a shit about the people who do give a shit about technology. And that's really what it boils down to. I mean, I like the open build service. I like a lot of that stuff that SUSE as a company and OpenSUSE help push forward. I'm not saying any of these projects don't contribute to the ecosystem. OpenSUSE is just very specific on what it's looking to do and does well, and its audience. Totally respect that. Linux Lite, I can't talk about it because I haven't really used it. Let's see, like, some of these distros are going to be a problem because I can't recommend them, and or I say anything really about them because I haven't used them, because a lot of my distro hopping days are kind of behind me. Like, I test distros, but overall, I still can't make that recommendation. So Zorin, I'm going to go as good for new users, because it falls in this weird catch-22 position of like good and okay. It's good for new users based on how the UI is laid out, the support system, and all the other stuff that they currently have as a company, as like the out-of-the-box experience that they look to provide for their distro. Their packaging is a little, like, I don't know where they're sitting, what base they're sitting at right now for Zorin. I haven't really looked, so I can't really comment on that, but just on the initial what I know of and how they cater to that specific distro to new users with things like the different profiles for layouts and all that kind of stuff, and like the support they provide if you buy, I think it's the Ultimate Edition. It's been a while since I looked at their stuff. That is, I think, fantastic. I mean, I have no problem spending $40 to go and provide support for whatever, but you know, to each their own as far as that. So you might find it fantastic, you might not find it fantastic. Like this is all subjective. I want to make this clear. These are all subjective opinions, very specifically targeted to this one demographic of user, not subjective opinion parading as objective fact. So next one, we got Garuda. Ironically, you would think I would, this is fantastic. I would love to put Garuda up there because it works a lot of the time for a lot of the stuff I've used it for, like from personal experience. I can't, because it's Arch. It is very user specific and use case specific. So if people, based on their hardware needs, need bleeding edge, like you have an AMD system, like this is a many forums, I think it's a Neptune HX90 or whatever the serial number is, but it's an AMD system. So if I want the latest and greatest stuff, I need the newest kernels, I need the newest maces and all that stuff. So it's very use case specific, especially on that kind of hardware. Things like Flatpak and a lot of the other stuff from an application point of view have kind of, for me personally, kind of diminished some of the needs necessary for a lot of the AUR stuff. So that mitigates it. So I can't, and this is mostly aimed at creators and content gamers. So it's really, really specific to what it does. But I will say that it knows that audience really, really well, because they just really, really want to get ready into gaming or content creation, and they make that process fantastic on first boot. And it's just check off a bunch of applications that you need and install stuff and go. That to me is fantastic. I've seen this one thrown around for new users, and I can't really make that recommendation because it's not a development environment, but it is. Like KDE Neon falls in this kind of weird, like, latest and greatest KDE on Ubuntu, which is a fantastic concept and idea, and I love that idea. But it falls into that kind of weird, like, I don't know why you would recommend it for a new user, because that out of the box experience you can get much better with something like Ubuntu, which is somewhere on the list here. So it's really weird when people recommend this specifically. I would recommend this specifically for people who are looking at KDE and seeing what KDE has to offer. I kind of view KDE Neon as kind of like GNOME OS. It's not really an OS, but it's an OS nonetheless. It's kind of like a snapshot of what's going on in Plasma and stuff. That's kind of how I would view it. So when I see people kind of recommend it, I'm like, I don't know about that. And then you have like the user editions, and I'm not going to lie, like default Plasma out of the box, not a stellar experience. And I'm a Plasma guy. I am not a GNOME guy at all. Elementary. Elementary falls in this weird, it's good or it's okay. I'm only putting them in good because they fall more into aiming at their demographic than they fall out of it. So application selection, design theory, and all the other stuff that they have going on is fantastic. However, application selection defaultly is kind of a problem. There's just certain things that it's not really a big hurdle, and it's very focused. The defaults are sane. The way they go about stuff is very end user focused, and that's the target demo. And they really do aimed to cater to that, it's just not an amazing experience. I think it's good for most people who have kind of that Apple mentality, that they want a consistent UI kind of look, but they also don't give a shit about technology. Let's be real. That's most actual users. Antics, now if I remember correctly, it's been a while, is just MX without system D, if I am not mistaken. And honestly, for me, I just don't care. Like system D stuff and complaints about that, I have an opinion about, but like if a distro that like that's what it does, that's what it does. Cool. Kali Linux, very specific. Puppy, lightweight, very specific design. Nabara, seen this thrown around a few times because of Glorious Egg Roll's attachment to it. I can't. This is going to fall into very use case specific. Alma, basically, if you want Red Hat for free. PC Linux OS. It has been so long since I've done PC Linux OS, I can't really have a valid opinion on that. Nix OS knows what it wants. Like its audience is its audience, and despite who some of those people are, it reminds me almost of kind of like Chaos and KAOS, and it is very specific about what it's looking to do. Now that's cool, whatever. Same with Nabar, same with Puppy, same with Kali. Vanilla, I got no opinion on. Alpine, I got no personal opinion on. Peppermint. I have an opinion. I can't. Because I can't say it's okay for new users, but I can't say it's terrible for new users. So I can't really give a valid opinion on that one. Ubuntu. Out of all the Ubuntus, and this could be my inner fanboyism coming out, but I think out of all the Ubuntu offerings, Ubuntu is the one that has the most sane defaults, the most generically that caters to the best out of the box experience from the official flavors. I'll put it that way. Now, some people totally disagree. That's fine. I would say generically, though, I think it's really, really good for new users. Solus. Right now, I'm going to have to say it's bad for new users just because there's so much changing in Solus with like Josh Struggle coming back. I'm not sure what they're doing with Budgie as far as a project. There's just a lot of rebases and a lot of, so like as it is at this moment, I can't recommend it based on all the current influx changes. As a project, when it has a mission and a goal, it is fan-fucking-tastic. BlendOS, that's I get the concept, so it's very user-specific. It's make the underlying OS immutable and make all the other shit just not matter. If you want, APK, if you want Deb or whatever, insert distro. It makes the distro packaging not fucking matter. I love the concept, but it's very user specific because most users don't want to use the blinky cursor thing. They just want to, click a fucking GUI. Ubuntu, again, to me, that is very user specific. The target demo is going to be very different in that regard. Slackware, again, if you want to learn Linux distros and have dependency hell, there you go. CentOS, well, can't really use that one. Ubuntu, same deal. Then what else we got? Gentoo. Gentoo is very use case specific because not everyone wants to build everything from source. And yes, I know there's portage, but realistically, it's a source built distro. No one wants to fucking do it unless you're that person. So when people make those recommendations for this particular demo, I hope you're the new user that wants to learn OSs. That's where I'll put it. Red Hat. So unlike other people, I'm not a total chode and douchebag, and I don't call or consider Red Hat the devil. I just consider it not end user distro. I consider it a very specific use case. If you admin servers and that kind of stuff, like it has its uses, but it is very use case specific. Arch. I'm an Arch guy, but I'm not unaware that Arch is very, again, use case specific. I view Arch as more of like an appliance OS. You build on top of it generically. Ubuntu Mate. Good. The software boutique. Insert all the other fine things that they've done with making Mate usable and kind of bringing a lot of niceties that we all kind of take for granted now. I still consider it a fantastic distro for new users, honestly. Okay, so despite politics, this one's going to get me probably in trouble. Despite politics, I'm not going to say this is bad for new users because I'm talking out of the box experience stuff. I want to make this clear. Deepin is okay for new users. If you're in China, or if you don't give a shit about the philosophical and the political goings on of your technology. Which realistically, if you do give a crap about the political leanings of your technology, don't buy. I love when Linux people talk about, don't buy from China, but they buy a ThinkPad, which is Lenovo, which is a Chinese company. Just irony tends to escape people. So for me, I think it's okay. It has one of the best, visually speaking, best design stores. It has probably one of the best and looking desktop UIs, etc. They took out some of the things that I did like about it, but personally, I think it's okay for users. But you have to go into it knowing or understanding that there's a caveat of the back end might not be fantastic for you. Artix, I really got no opinion. Void is your very specific use case. Ubuntu Studio, content creation, again, you can make it okay for new users. I'm not gonna say it's bad for new users, but you can make it very user specific because of the way it's built. No idea as far as Euro OS, and I can't have an opinion on CentOS because, well, CentOS isn't really a thing anymore. So there you go. You guys wanted a kind of how I view distros. Well, this is how I view distros specifically for new users in and of itself. And ironically, if you look, most of them are actually Ubuntu-based distros or Debian. And I'm just going to say, and it's not because I have a preference for it. Anybody who knows me or has listened to me talk about this, I run Arch. I run Arch distros. Just my preference. However, new users generally don't give a fuck about their tech and what makes it go from. And once you generically get outside of a lot of these other distros, the Ubuntu bases or the Debian bases, a lot more of them cater generally to the people who give a shit about their technology as far as how it works and whatnot. Generally, not always. So again, this is, I want to make this clear. This is not subjective, or me trying to make this like an objective factual list. This is me very subjective. There's reasons why I have no opinion on certain distros, because I don't use them, I haven't used them, etc. There's very use case specific distros, but the one thing that all these distros do that other people will say are pointless is that they add something to the overall ecosystem, especially when you look at the big picture. However, people sometimes don't want to look at the big picture because they have their head shoved so far up their own ass that they can't see a different perspective. So there you guys go. You wanted a tier list, there's your tier list. It's just very specifically targeted. You guys know what to do. Comment, subscribe, thumbs up, thumb down, all the jazz. Indie Gala, Patreon, all that stuff down in the description. And I will catch you guys on the flip. Peace.